Generational trauma doesn't just shape your emotions, it actually lives in your body, in your cells, and in every ache, tension, illness that you've endured. You see, the pain that you feel is not just a burden, it literally is a map pointing you to where generational wounds, these patterns that need healing. And here's the real truth: what feels like suffering is actually the beginning of justice. It's your body calling you back to wholeness. Today, Elvira and I will take you to the root cause of physical body healing. We're going to explore why addressing generational trauma requires more than surface level fixes and why it demands a somatic and spiritual approach. Through Kundalini Yoga Therapy's transformative practices, things like breath work, movement, and sound, combined with the spiritual teachings of our brother Jesus Christ from A Course in Miracles, we're going to show you how to release trauma that is stored in the body, which is not only causing you physical illness, but healing inherited patterns and rebuilding your vitality. Together, we're going to guide you to a deeper understanding of how somatic and spiritual healing work hand in hand to restore balance and sovereignty in your life. Now that was a mouthful. How are you, Elvira?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm awesome. Thank you. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
The first episode of the year of the Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast, and we're gonna start off with a bang. It's like let's just get right to it, right? I think that we're in a state of the world. Our prayers go out to everybody who is moving through their own rebuilding journey and rebuilding process. But I think I don't know if you would agree with me, but the world in itself, we're in a crisis of healthcare. So many people are physically ill. And the thing is that this wasn't just overnight. I feel like it's been building up with the large levels of stress, especially past this pandemic era. Or how are you seeing it? What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely building up for sure. And I'm seeing it a lot in people around me, even including myself. And it's crazy that this is the topic that we're doing today because there was a movie that we watched last night in regards to it's based on a true story in regards to AIDS and how the medication that they were giving them in the beginning was experimental, but it wasn't working. And what was working, which was a little bit more natural stuff, the FDA didn't want to approve it. It was this whole thing. We'll get into it. But yes, I definitely see it for sure.
That's so interesting because my teacher, she's a doctor. She has her PhD and she's a Kundalini yoga therapist. But her work began with AIDS people in the 90s when Kundalini yoga was starting to pick up momentum in LA. And she noticed that there was a certain population that would come to her over and over again. It was these people that were going through AIDS. And she just felt so frustrated that these people were not given a lot of hope or faith around being able to live for long periods of times. So because she had already been practicing Kundalini yoga for 15, 20 years by then, because Jogi Bhajan came to the West in the 70s, late 60s. Through that, she was able to develop a protocol for AIDS, people who developed AIDS. And that's where this science behind this meditation, known as a self-efficacy meditation, was developed, where they, through 8-week series of classes for AIDS, people that were going through AIDS, not only were they able to prolong or the disease, make the disease not spread or make it worse, but these people then ended up living long lives, all because of the fact that they focus on the root cause, which is what we're going to talk about today. So it's funny that you bring that up, and I'm sure that it'll come up in what we're talking about here. But I think one of the things that people miss a big mark on, and this is a thing that she proved back then and now has become much more mainstream, is the fact that all physical disease starts with an emotion. And that when we go to the doctor and you have a physical disease, they don't ask you about your childhood. They
Mm.
don't ask you about your relationships at home. They don't ask you about your generational patterns of trauma. And the problem is that if all disease starts with the physical and emotion, and if we don't address the root cause, then what we're doing with the Western approach of pharmaceuticals is simply putting a band-aid on a very infected wound that eventually will rupture. And I think that what we are seeing in the world right now is a representation of the fact that this has not worked and will not continue to work, and that we have to do something about it now. Because why wouldn't we have want a society that is healthy? That's what I don't get. I understand that pharmaceuticals are for profit. I've known that for a long time. In fact, that's what kept me away. When I was a little girl, I knew that I wanted to be a therapist. I always told my parents and my mom and my dad, I want to be a therapist or a psychologist. And then I got pregnant really young at 16, 17. I went back to school, actually, college when I was 18. But I went for accounting because at that point, somebody had given me a position as a bookkeeper, really young. So I wanted to kick ass. And as a bookkeeper, I was making a lot of money for an 18-year-old, right? And then I did that for a few years. And then, like around my mid 20s, I was like, it's time to get back to my purpose, what I'm here to do. And I was going to go back to school to become a psychotherapist, or maybe even go deeper than that and study more in as a naturopathic. But at that point, naturopathics were not very popular either. But when I found out all the stuff that the psychotherapists went to school for, and that basically they were just drug dealers that were licensed by the government, that all they did was give people drugs to heal, I backed up. And I'm so glad that I listened to my intuition back then, because even though I hadn't gone through my spiritual awakening, I was like, this is not for me. I don't believe in any of this. I don't believe that you get a band-aid and you put it on someone and you think that's what's going to heal them. At that point, I remember I was still moving through a lot of anxiety and a lot of different states of depression. But yet, maybe it was because of my mom, because my mom never took antidepressants, and she never really programmed us to believe in that way. She was very conscious about her relationship to the doctors, but I was like, no, that's not for me. And I'm so grateful, because not only would I have wasted so much time and money, but I would have felt guilty as heck being a person that all they do is look at people's symptoms and not really look at the root cause. What have you seen as it relates to the connection between our trauma, generational trauma patterns, and the physical illnesses that then show up?
First of all, in regards to being like a therapist and stuff, what I've noticed more now and what I've been told from psychologists who went to school for that they've gone more into the coaching side because they have more of a liberty to express more, be more open to speak. Otherwise, they're more in this box and they can't really say certain things they have to just keep it in here. And plus the prescription medication. And I think deep down, they don't believe in that. So they go into the coaching side where they have a little bit more liberty to say what they need to say and be more open into other areas like meditation or whatever. In regards to the medical, I think it's both. I think we live in this society, in this country where they approve and they said it yesterday. They were in court with the FDA against the FDA. The FDA needs to work for the people. It's not they shouldn't be working for the corporations to make their money. They should be working for us. And they approve all these foods that make us addicted to keep eating that is not good for us. All these dyes, these colors, whatever that are making us physically sick. And then add on top of that, we are already carrying all these trauma from past generations. And then it's like this ticking time bomb. Everybody's just, and you see it so much. In other countries, I've heard people say they can't eat gluten, for instance, but they go to other countries like in Europe, Italy, whatever, and they eat pastas, they eat pizza, they eat the bread, and they're completely fine. So there's obviously something here that they're feeding us that we're not supposed to. But in regards to trauma, I know for a fact with me, with migraines and stuff like that, I know it's correlated to stress to a certain point. It's coming from issues, family issues that haven't been dealt, that need to be dealt with, that we're trying to still work things out. But it comes to a point where either, yeah, like I'm doing the work, but the other people are not doing the work. And it's hard to come to a point where an understanding, I guess you could say. For instance, last week I had an issue. My sister had a meeting with somebody and they said something and it was upsetting for sure. So this Saturday I was talking to her and she was helping me out through it. And I said, you know what? I really need to work out because one of the things based on my date of birth is that the certain meditations that I need to do, but I also need to do vigorous exercise. And I noticed that when I was running, I could feel I was just releasing something because I could feel it here. I was just like, okay, this is exactly what I needed because I was storing it. I could feel it in my shoulders.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's certain things that I think we all need to do regards besides acknowledging, I think also the breath work and the exercise and stuff like that, it works together.
Yeah.
Correlation.
1,000%. 1,000%. And it has to do with the fact that everything in this world is an energy. It's a frequency and nothing is matter. Even the chair we're sitting on, the mat, everything is a frequency. If you get a telescope, it's vibrating at the lowest, at the deepest we can get to it. So what does that mean? If everything is a frequency, that means that our emotions are frequency, energy in motion. And that if we're not taught to channel and what to basically have a controlled burn, because we all go through an alchemical process of Kundalini awakening our consciousness and evolving. If you do not accept the Christ consciousness in this lifetime, it's okay. God's not mad. Like you got lots of lifetimes to do that. I'm sure we've had other lifetimes, right, that we've led up to this, right? The truth is that you can do a controlled burn of these emotions through the channeling of emotions or energy, which is breath, movement, which you're talking about, sound, right? What we need to understand here is that trauma alters our gene expressions through what is known as epigenetic changes. So this is the science of epigenetics. And basically, it's not that the DNA sequence it's changed, it affects how genes are turned on or off. So there's a unified field, and in the unified field, we are the universe. And every inhale and exhale, problem is that people, because of trauma, are not in the present moment. If you've gone through a lot of abuse as a child, you have a lineage that comes from a lot of abuse, you're always living in the past or in the future. And it's not your fault, right? And we're not trying to find a victim or someone to blame. It's the fact that your nervous system is stuck in fight or flight because of the trauma, and your nervous system and your brain don't know that you're not in the trauma. Like you could wake up in the morning 50 years later and your body starts sweating. Your glands start acting up, right? You start to feel afraid. Why? Because the body keeps the score of the trauma. There's a whole book on this. A doctor recently did this book. Actually, it was like 5, 8 years ago, but it's recent to the fact that these things don't hit mainstream media because they don't benefit the pharmaceutical industry. So what happens is that all of us, so let's say grandma and grandpa were heavily addicted, tragic things happened to them in their life, disconnection of marriages, all those things. Now you're born, your mom is born, and then she has 6 of you, right? Why aren't all 6 getting the same physical illnesses? That's because it depends on how you as a human being are managing your stress. You and your sisters and your brothers have the same DNA sequences in you. You have the same probability of becoming addicted as your sister if your grandpa was heavily addicted because that was his coping mechanism, right? However, if I am maintaining a healthy lifestyle, meaning I have a meditation practice, I have an exercise practice. Exercise is really good, but it will never ever compare to meditation because exercise only works on the physical body. That's why you have a lot of people that are addicted to the gym, but they are very unhealthy. They might have muscles and they might have all these things, but their mind is completely unhealthy because of the way they're pushing themselves. And they might be taking other things like steroids and stuff of that nature too. Basically, they're doing it because they want people to approve of them based on an outer because they're hiding what's really going on inside of them. So that's their escape haven. Let me look perfect on the outside so nobody questions anything of what's going on inside of here. And we have 10 energetic bodies, and physical exercise sometimes moves 2 bodies, which is your physical and your mind, but it doesn't address the other 8 layers of who you are, right? So if you're somebody who who is managing her stress. You have a great spirituality practice every day. That's what I call sadhana, meaning you pray to God, you go to church, maybe, right? You read spiritual teachings. Although a lot of people are having massive spiritual awakenings and that feel like psychosis, because remember, now we have access to these teachings. Back then, we didn't. Look at us now. We can get the Bhagavad Gita, we can get the Bible, we can get the Torah, we can get, and I know people who went into these a year of studying all of this and who had a spiritual awakening that feels like a psychosis, right? But if you're managing your dailies with spirituality, with meditation that's bringing oxygen to the brain, then that's why you're not addicted and your sister is addicted. Or that's why you have physical healing and you're thriving and your sister is not. And that's why she has this and that, right? Because it's our genes, we're not like slaves to our ancestors' genes because we have control of what turns on or off based on how we're managing our stress. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I
of
hope
course.
that people are really understanding. And it's not something that you should feel negative about or like it's like guilty. For me, my physical disease, although I can remember times where I had major, like there was this one time I had just had my son. He was a year old, and I had this emergency surgery that I had to have done because I had a huge cyst that was growing on one of my ovaries. And back then, I didn't put the two and two together of everything that's happening. And now in my healing journey, I look back and I was like, oh, I remember what I was going through. And even the organ that I was connected. Oh my God. Not only was I not managing my stress, I was carrying all this guilt because of X, Y, and Z. No wonder. So I've had different moments of my life where I've had the generational trauma show up as a physical disease. That was one time. And then for a very long period of time, the physical disease for me was the addiction to alcohol. Because, and this is why I always say, the addicted person is the one that's showing where there's something wrong in the lineage. The only one that's brave enough to be like, I can't handle this shit. I can't handle not being authentically me. And this is why I'm saying, and we're going to get to this, and I'll let you add to this before we get to that part. But illness, whatever type of illness, is actually justice. But the problem here, and we're going to talk about this very deeply, is that when we have not done generational healing work and we have a lot of resentment towards the people that hurt us, like our parents, like our abuser, or whoever did to us, right? Then what happens is that you then become a martyr and then you get illness after illness. And then you say, God is just trying to show me a lesson or life is not fair. And that is the really sad part because when I saw my addiction to alcohol as the justice being served to me as a pathway to liberate myself, to express, to finally say to the world, I am not being authentically me. When I finally realized that, that's when I stopped feeling shame about it. And that's when I had the prana to actually heal it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes, even in the Course in Miracles. I was listening to last week's, and it was talking about how we need to heal the brain in order to be able to heal the body. Because it's really whatever's going on in our body is because it's coming through our head. It's whatever's going on in our head, that's what's happening in our body. We just don't realize and connect the two together.
Well, and it's really beyond the brain because the brain is not what's creating the thoughts, it's the nervous system.
Yeah.
The brain downloads information. So, in order to rewire and heal the brain, you have to rewire and heal the nervous system. But the problem with generational trauma is that if we've had a lot of trauma, then our nervous system is stuck in fight and flight. It's stuck in survival. And because it's stuck in survival, the thoughts and emotions and feelings it's downloading are not being downloaded from God, from source. They're being downloaded from this illusion of separation from God. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things, and let's look at the spiritual approach to this, since we brought up already A Course in Miracles, because we're going to talk about somatic healing. Somatic is basically addressing body, mind, and spirit. You have to address the triangle, otherwise you're not going to get to the root cause of the physical illness, right? So one of the things that I was mentioning, and these are, again, you have to remember, our brother Jesus Christ was a radical being, right? He came, he was not messing around, no sugarcoating. It's not forgive, it's unconditional forgiveness. It's not love someone, it's unconditional love. And it's not love all the people that are your family, but don't love the prisoners. There's no middle with what our brother Jesus Christ teaches. And that's why a lot of people are going back to the Christ teachings, and a lot of people are gravitating back to our brother Jesus Christ, because truly this is the second coming of Christ. But why is that happening? Because in the last 5 years, people have hit rock bottoms in their lives that they've never hit before. Now, I was a early adapter. My rock bottom started in 2008 and it peaked in 2015. So 2015 was my rock bottom. So by the time all this started happening, I was like, this is nothing. This is like a walk in the park, because I think God did that on purpose. God let me get you situated for what's to come, because by the time 2020 comes, I need you to be positioned. And this is why exactly I left the real estate industry in 2018, because I knew big things were coming, and I knew I needed to be positioned for this, for my life purpose, really, to do what it is that I'm here to do, which is why God, when I went through all those experiences of generational healing. But the whole thing about the course, and let's talk about the spiritual aspect of the healing, because we have to heal the mind in order to heal the physical body. That, remember, the emotions create the disease, right? So if we don't deal with the emotions, and it's not, please do not get afraid, everyone listening, and say, oh my God, I had an anger emotion yesterday, I am going to get a disease. That's not the way it works. It's being in that, identifying with that emotion. I'm an angry person. Remember, when you stay in an emotion for a long time, it becomes your personality, and you can't hide that from people. So it's us not doing anything about releasing that addiction to that identity, right? Because now we have pathways to actually heal, especially with more and more things that are happening, like our wonderful friend, Dr. Gabor Mate, who's out all over the world with that. And man, I pray for him, because he is in his 70s, and the work that God has given him to do to get all of this out to the world. God, my prayers are always with that man. So much in conviction to get all of this out. But from a spiritual perspective, illnesses caused by generational trauma, they're not punishment. They're a call to awareness. One of the things that Lizzie was sharing with me last week that really stood out, Lizzie's our Course in Miracles teachers inside of our community, was she was saying, I was really like stuck in why justice is the beginning. The course kept saying, justice is the beginning. And she's, are you sure? Are you ready to hear this? She was texting me, and I was telling her, absolutely. And in my own mind, I was like, the beginning, thinking to myself. But the way the course describes justice is, typically when we look at the dictionary on the dictionary, we look at the definition, it says a principle separate from love which punishes sinners for their crimes. In this world, we believe that's what justice is. And when we don't do generational healing work, and we don't heal our mind and our body and spirit, what happens? We think the same way. Like you said earlier, other people don't do their work. That's not our problem, whether other people do their work or not, or whether they heal or not. Because when we don't know who we are at our core, we believe that justice is that person needs to get punished. That person needs to go to jail. That person deserves bad stuff happening. Or even worse, I see a lot of people right now on social media that unfortunately their nervous systems are so unhinged that they literally, and I don't blame them, I have a lot of compassion for them, but they're like going out on social media and putting out all of their skeletons. This is what happened to me. This is what they did to me. Why are they doing that? Why can't they control themselves? Because they are so tired of living a false lie where people do not believe them. And they believe that by saying it out loud and yelling it to the world, now they have an excuse to be validated why they don't level up in life, why they're angry all the time, why they're not successful in their business. It's like the ego convinced system. If now the whole world knows what happened to you, you have this identity. And I'm not saying, if you feel that it is liberating for you to speak to the whole world about what happened to you, go for it. But do it from a place of, I am liberated and I'm doing this to liberate others, not from a place of, I need validation because I am a victim and I need an excuse to continue to live angry.
to continue to blame these people for now my illness or my unhappiness or why my marriage didn't work out. The ego is so conniving, and this is hard to hear in so many levels, especially if you are physically ill right now. But understand that your program, which is the ego, is literally convincing you that the only way you'll be at peace is if that other person is punished. And that is not justice. Our brother Jesus Christ in A Course in Miracles teaches us that justice is a principle which gives love and forgiveness to everyone with complete impartiality and without any limits. It gives no punishment and asks for no penalty. And we don't believe in this because we have such an upside down perception of God. We believe we're being punished. And we don't understand that true fairness, because no one has broken God's laws, is unconditional love and forgiveness. Like I said, we've talked about this before. I don't necessarily believe like you should go hang out with the person who hurt you if you're not energetically ready. What I said is create the space to move away from that situation, but to learn to still release and forgive, because otherwise the physical illness is going to be there. 1,000%. It's trying to liberate you. It's trying to give you the justice that you've been seeking. Because through this work, I know one thing that I learned is that everyone is still the son of God. My biggest Judas, the people that have hurt me the more, they're all innocent. And the miracle is that everyone is worthy of God's forgiveness, because there's no order of difficulty in miracles. And that the world's justice, what the world calls justice, is really injustice. Because what is it? It's a justification for attack. Why did our brother go on that cross and say, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do"? Because he had received his justice. His justice was, he had transcended the body. He didn't suffer up there on that cross. And that's the whole thing, that we believe we're so separate from God because we believe in sin. If you believe in sin, you're going to believe in the worldly definition of justice. But if you believe that people make mistakes and that God is a loving God that always doesn't even need to forgive, but is always there for you, then you will receive your justice. Because my justice, I know for me, my justice, it was the ability to forgive others and to forgive myself, or I can fall asleep every night without having to take 1,000 pharmaceuticals, right? Where I can fall asleep every night without having to drink all that alcohol that I had to drink. When living in integrity and character, being around my children, that's physical wealth. But when I was in resentment and I was angry and I wanted everyone to receive their justice, I wasn't even present for my children. And because I wasn't even present for my children, I wasn't present for my husband, I wasn't present for my body, which then percolates the physical illness. So does that make sense, how upside down everything is in this world and how we need to revert it? It does, and it's still struggling because I'm still trying to figure it myself. Because it gets hard when especially when you're upset at someone and you just want to let it go. You're like, fine, they just said what they said and they weren't supposed to say that. It's not true, whatever. So I think I definitely still struggle with it and still trying to figure out, because yeah, we're always taught, like we said before, it's always so based on the crucifixion. It's always, he was crucified, instead of focusing more on the resurrection of what is this teaching me? How can I grow from it? And still forgiving and letting go. And like you said, not have, that doesn't mean we're going to hang out with this person, but really know that they're acting out of their own inner child. They're acting out of their own hurt, of their own pain that they haven't been able to deal with. And it gets difficult because you're like, what about my pain? What about what they did to me? But it just goes back and forth, and it keeps studying the Course in Miracles like we do. Because every time we listen to it, every time we study it, we learn something new. We get like different levels of aha moments of, okay, I understand this now because I didn't understand it the first time I heard it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. I've been studying it since 2008, and I started teaching it in 17. And I did that for about a lot of years. And then just last year, Lizzie took it on. My sister took it on teaching it. And now that she's teaching it, it's like a brand new book to me. I'm like, what? I didn't know this. I didn't know this. Why? But this goes back to what we're going to talk about next, which is the nervous system. Everything I'm telling you right now, whoever's listening to this, if all of this triggered the bejesus out of you and you're like, you're nuts, it's because of your nervous system. That's why, bottom line, if your nervous system is so dysregulated because you've been under chronic stress for a long time, there's no way what I'm saying to you is even going to make an impact. You're going to turn this podcast episode off so quickly. You are going to run away from A Course in Miracles so quickly. And you especially will not do the meditation work. I argue with God about this, believe me, because I have had one-on-one clients where, dear Lord, they've reached out and they're ready to do the work, but they've been through so much and it's so hard to get them to just start at the beginning, right? To just, we're doing 1 week at a time. Just let's learn to breathe first, right? And I'm like, God, why did you make this so unfair? The people that go through the worst traumas, you leave them with the worst nervous system, which makes it the hardest for me to get through to them what I'm trying to say to you that you're telling me to say to them. So when somebody has done no healing work, or even myself, if I stop doing my sadhana practice, I will revert back to a dysregulated nervous system, not because of my generational trauma, because of stress. Chronic stress is everywhere and it's not bad. It's what are you going to do about it? Stress just means you're growing. My business is growing right now. I'm transferring systems right now. I'm getting into depths of my Kundalini yoga therapy teacher training or therapist training that I've never been to before. I'm doing homework and protocols and science. That's stress. It comes with growth. It's what are you going to do about it? So if I were to revert back to not doing my sadhana practice every day, where I bring prana and life force energy into my brain to keep it nice and oxygenated, my nervous system nice and regulated every day. And again, it's not all love and light. A lot of the times, most of the times in meditation, I am purging, screaming, doing all the things I need to do. But if I didn't do this every day, I would easily revert back to not forgiving. I would easily revert back to drinking alcohol. Why don't I go back to drinking alcohol? Because I have prana in my system that keeps my nervous system regulated. You have to understand that not only is the nervous system impacted through generational trauma, the brain, but the fascia. The fascia is like this tissue that holds all of our organs together, all of our, basically everything together. And it's like a fluid that moves through the entire body. Now science proves that fascia stores trauma too. Trauma that you've been through. And you take a pill because something's wrong with your kidney. How is how is that pill only going to the kidney? Number one, it doesn't. It doesn't just go to the kidney. Number two is, how is that pill gonna fix the fascia where all that trauma is? How is the pill going to heal the energy meridians, which in Kundalini yoga therapy, very similar to Chinese medicine, they're all connected. All the organs are connected. When somebody tells me I have sciatic nerve, that's not the real issue. We have another problem somewhere else. When somebody tells me I have a liver issue or I have a diabetes, that's not the real problem. We have another problem that we got to look at the meridians, how they're all connected. It doesn't work. Even talking about it, you go to a traditional therapist, that's why they have such low success rates. You could talk about it all you want until you're blue. And then you could even have 10,000 therapists agree with you and tell you, yeah, you're right. What you went through was horrific. That's horrible. Don't talk to your parents. Don't talk to the person. Yeah, put them in jail. Do all that. How is that going to release the trauma from your fascia? How is that going to release the trauma from your body that keeps the score? It's not.
You know, when you get a massage, I don't know how many massage, I will get them periodically, but I have this one lady who's she's worked with the Cardinals and stuff like that. So she's very talented in her work.
Mhm.
And there'll be times that I'll be getting a deep, I like the deep tissue massage. And I'm getting the massage and it'll trigger something. And I'll
Mhm.
start getting emotional.
Yeah.
And I'm there and I'm just breathing and I'm breathing. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening right now?
Sure.
Because you feel it. And a lot of times she'll tell me, she said, what is going on? You've been through a lot of stress, huh? You've been stressful lately, this and that. Like I could feel it on your hips or I could feel it here. I could feel it. She could tell, A lot of times I don't even have to tell her, she knows. And a lot of times when she's doing it, because it's the fascia, you feel it, and there's certain areas that you feel it even more. Unfortunately, sometimes it's even deeper, like in like deeper in your body, that is not just the surface.
Right.
But how much I know for a fact, me personally, I've been under a lot of stress since a child. So how long is there a timeline? Because I'm still struggling with this. Is there a timeline where we hit? I'm assuming there isn't. We're all different. We all process it differently. But I started the daily sadhana since 2020, and I'm just like, when am I finally gonna understand it? Because sometimes I feel frustrated. I'm like, just make me understand, God. Just make me understand. I want to see it the way
Right.
you're teaching it to me. But I still struggle with it a lot. I feel like it's taking too long.
Yeah, and it is so different for everyone. We have a molecular cell scientist, Julie Stiles, who just she's a Kundalini therapist, and she's also a scientist, like I said, and she also wrote a book on trauma and Kundalini therapy. And she did this protocol, and after 8 weeks, the people that came to through this protocol, this is a protocol actually that my teacher created back in the 80s, very similar to the things I would do inside of the academy, quite honestly. A little bit of a different approach with the things. And after 8 weeks, the person had zero PTSD symptoms. And it wasn't just one person, it was a group of people. But we can't really compare because we don't know what kind of trauma they had. We don't know what they've been through. I think the question you're posing already exemplifies where it's coming from. Where if you ever ask, when is it going to be over? That's from the ego. That's from a place of lack of acceptance. And the problem with that is that 99% of your healing is acceptance. So what we do, and I'm glad that you brought this up, because I think a lot of people, what they do wrong is that they accumulate all these healing modalities, thinking, I'm going to add a new one, I'm going to add a new one, I'm going to add a new one. And this is going to be the end. And what you're doing right there is you're still resisting life. So we have to get to a point where continue the practice so that your nervous system becomes stable enough so that you can go from resisting and when is this going to be over to accepting, because that's again the justice. There's a shift in consciousness that has to occur where, for example, in my life now, why I know that I'm in a different level of consciousness and healing is because, first of all, the things that I went through and the people, they don't trigger me the way they used to trigger me. That's one thing. But also, when life goes down, I don't add commotion to the emotion. There are certain things where I lose my cool. My husband says something, right? On Saturday, we're going to a quinceañera. We were late. We were all stressing out. Hurry up, you're already late. La. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, I don't identify myself with those emotions. I don't see myself as them. I see them as a moment in time and space. And what has really changed for me is the way I respond to life, in that when things seem to not be going the way I want them, what's the first thing I do? I talk to God. And because I talk to God, it no longer is a problem. It is justice. So we don't do this work so nothing bad happens to us. We do this work so we don't judge life as bad. We move through life with sovereignty, with equanimity, with neutrality. And that's not bypassing. That's called emotional intelligence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. My son of practice, like I said, I crave it because it does. I do feel it calms my nervous system down. And in a lot of things, I feel like I do accept them, but I guess deep down I must not be accepting it because it still bothers me at the moment. Like I said, like Saturday I was going through something, and I all week, and I needed to talk to my sister, but I couldn't get a hold of her because she was working. So finally Saturday, whatever she said to me, it calmed me down. I said, okay, that's what I needed to hear. But I feel like when stuff happens, it still triggers me. And that's where I still need to continue to work on.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be more things that will trigger me in the future, but I just don't judge them as something's wrong with me any longer. And what I also noticed too, and especially if you're somebody, so I've been on this healing journey since 2008, and it has been pivots and just climaxes and things of that nature. But to be honest with you, it got really bad before it got better. Really bad. I had a near death experience. That's how bad it got. When I finally started doing Kundalini yoga meditation. And everybody who I've seen, even especially my one-on-ones, I'm thinking of this particular client of mine who she finally voiced what was really going on and what happened to her as a child. And then from there, you would think that the healing would just be instantaneously. No. From there, physical illness came, physical tumors. Why? Because she finally was able to talk about it to somebody. And then what happened? She ended up going to the doctor. They did the surgery. They took them out. She had tumors in her mouth because she couldn't speak about her truth. And then what happened? We kept doing the Kundalini yoga. She kept telling me, I'm so grateful that I have Kundalini yoga because without Kundalini yoga, I wouldn't have been able to survive this. I would have given up. I would have just said, no, I'm done with life. And this is what I'm telling you, justice is the illness. And when we cannot accept justice as the illness, then what happens next? We leave the body. Because how did our brother Jesus Christ teach? When somebody was very physically ill, there was a guy who came to him with Lyme's disease or something crazy like that, right? And Jesus is like, oh, what did you learn? What did you learn in this situation? And the guy was like, nothing. I'm so pissed off at God. My life has been a complete drama and trauma. No, God, and Jesus Christ was like, perfect. And please learn through transition. Jesus Christ would not take away the illness, even though Jesus Christ could heal everybody. But Jesus Christ did not take away the illness. Jesus Christ says, you're going to have to die and rebirth to continue the university. And that's why I notice people we have family members who had gone through severe trauma, and I have overdoses. Why did they overdose? First of all, the severe trauma was not allowing them to live in their physical body authentically. It was so horrible. Nobody could listen to them. Nobody heard them. Their brain was completely fractured. So then they got into drugs. Makes sense, right? To numb out the pain. And then what happened? They picked the wrong pill. They overdose. Why? Because the nervous system in the brain cannot allow them to understand that this was justice, that their addiction was justice, that the illness is justice. And it's not that now you're a bad person for not getting it, or we're bad people if we don't do the work that Jesus Christ did and we don't do the stuff that our Course in Miracles did, or we're bad people if we don't do our sadhana. That's not at all what I'm saying. Because believe me, when my grandmother transitioned, my sadhana was the weakest. Like I couldn't. I just had so much going through me. When my mom was in the hospital, my mom went into the hospital with this infection in her spine. My sadhana suffered greatly. There were days I didn't do it. I say I didn't do it because I was sitting here and I was asleep or not present, or I would have to do it when I'm driving. Like I still get my chanting in when I'm driving to the hospital or when I'm doing things, but doing it to me means like I was literally sitting there. So the situation is that we have to reverse these things, including the trauma, including the physical illness, and see them as what they are: liberation, justice. And we can't do that, this is why I tell God, why do you make my job so hard? If people go through trauma, don't mess with their nervous systems, God, because at least if you didn't mess with their nervous system, I can talk to them and they can hear me. And the only reason why I'm so passionate about this and why I know so much about this is because I experienced it. That's the only reason. And I'm telling you that if I can do this, everybody in this world, as bad as it is, and because I have worked with people that have gone through the most severe, it's not good to compare yourself with anyone ever, but I've talked to people where I was like, fuck, I would never be able to go through that shit. I would have been gone. I would have been on my next assignment. So I have a lot of compassion, a ton of compassion. But what I do know is that in this new era, we do have the tools to be able to do this. It just requires a lot of surrender. Oh my God, so much just trusting the process. I think that was a big thing for me because I was like that. I was like a spiritual junkie, like just since 2008, just testing every yoga out, testing every spiritual teaching out. I went and I studied all the different religions. I went to the jungle. And then it was in Course in Miracles kept coming back. My brother Jesus Christ teachings in the Bible. I read a lot of the Bible now combined with the Course in Miracles. It's the same thing, except the way the Bible is explained is not right. Is not, in my opinion, correct. And then when Kundalini Yoga came into my life, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is it. I just have to be consistent. I have to stick with it. I have to be disciplined. That's the whole thing that a lot of people think that in the spiritual work, we don't have to be disciplined. It requires the most amount of discipline. And not only that, if you're a spiritual woman, because I was very logical minded Capricorn, now because of my practice, I'm very creative and I have so many ideas that I need to learn to channel and ground them. I need more discipline. I need more mentors. I need more coaches that are going to keep me in line because, oh, it's so easy for me to be like, no, I'm not going to do this today, or I'm not going to apply this today. Also, the other thing that has helped tremendous is community. Our community, like and everything you all share in my community, like you all are teaching me. That's exactly what I needed to hear today. So being able to come to Tuesdays, being able to talk in A Course in Miracles, and I'm like that all over the place. Like even in my business coach, I'm like the first one raising my hand. What about this? We have to stop feeling embarrassed and we have to be vulnerable. And if we really want this, we got to ask the questions, regardless of what they sound like. And like I said, like you going to a Tuesday Course in Miracles and you see the replays, I'm a student and I don't care. Like last week, I asked a very vulnerable question. I was like, here's the truth. This is what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? And that's when Lizzie was able to help us do that. But yeah, it does require infinite patience. It requires so much trust and so much surrender. And I think it is so difficult. I'm not going to cover, like, it's not love and light. It is so difficult, especially when you have physical disease. When I had the addiction to alcohol, it was so hard because I felt so unworthy. I felt like I was doing everything wrong. And then even when the physical disease came too, we were doing a clearing of the womb last year. Remember, we were doing that 40 days. I had physical disease come up in so many ways that I was like, what the? But I already know with the 40 days, every time we do a 40-day journey in the academy, the first 10 to 20 days, the wound is out, the exposure is out, the sickness hits. I already know because we've done it enough times where it's like just surrender. The prosperity journey we went on right now, it took a little bit longer because usually I'm like by day 20, I get it. I understand we're already on day 28 and it finally hit 2 days ago. So this is not necessarily a walk in the park. This is not something that people run to sign up for. What I do know is that it absolutely brings you to a level of peace where even if physical disease was present, you would have, I would have the prana to be able to see it as it is, which is my justice. To finally let it all go. It's exactly what happened with my mom. People who take care of their caretakers, of their parents when they're sick, within a year, my teacher was telling me that there's these diagnoses within a year, they get very sick. Or when someone dies in your family, within a year, that person gets very, very sick or even sometimes dies. That we talked about the dead people take 3 people. So a year later, when my mom got really sick, I was like, yes, this is the beginning of her healing journey. I love it. Thank God. And that illness came after she was finally able to voice out all the shit she was holding on for all of her life. When my grandmother transitioned, she finally spoke her truth. And that's when it all changed for her.
Okay, that makes sense then. Thank you.
That
That
makes
makes
sense.
sense right now. I was like, oh my God, that's what's happening to me. No, I have my days. I have my days where I'm like, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it all. It's perfect. Everything's perfect. I get it. I wasn't being true to myself. I need to be 100% true to myself and speak my voice and say what I have to say and that I was worthy enough. But I have my days where I struggle. I'm just like, what is happening? Like, why is this happening to me? But right now, what you said is true because once I started speaking my truth, actually, yes, once I started working on myself and speaking my truth and really knowing that I was worthy and taking the time for my meditations to work on myself, this and that's when I hit. That was 2020 when I hit. My nervous system was so out of control. I had started Kundalini yoga before that when you open Satori. But like when COVID hit, that's when I committed to my sadhana,
Mhm.
which was around March or something like that. And then that summer, later, early the fall, that's when I ended up getting really sick. My whole nervous system was really bad that I had to get under medication. And even though I was still doing my sana, later that year, the next year I started the Course in Miracles. I committed to it. And then I was still doing my sana, and it just keeps growing and growing to the point where I'm like, no, I need to speak my voice. Where this last summer, I was like, I need to speak my voice. I need to say what I need to say. But it's like you said, it's hitting that point of, you're right. We're hitting that point where God's okay. This is what needed to happen to you in order for you to keep following that path.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're we're having a coaching session right now.
I didn't even
For
realize.
everybody to see.
But you know what? That was a question for both of us because I think both of it, I have the same questions as you. And I think our audience has the same questions, right? Like, when is it over? When do we ever feel happy? To be honest with you, we might get sick again. I might get sick again physically. Why? Because there might be a layer within me that I still have not released. I think I'm speaking my truth now, right? But am I? I don't know. But it doesn't matter whether illness happens again or whether eventually one of my parents is going to transition. Eventually we're going to lose people in our lives. Think about what's happening in the world. Look at the tragic fires that are happening in Los Angeles. If you look at that is justice. Why is that justice? Because what's being exposed is something that was incredibly disease filled. Look at all the stuff that's being revealed now. First of all, that there's 1% people that own 60% of the water rights in all of California, that there was a law that was passed in hiding that did this. Everything about what happened over there is burning down what doesn't work. Now, my meditation practice, that's life. Guess what? Get used to the fires. Our ancestors, they had controlled burns. And in fact, if we take on their teachings, and they've been trying to do this in California for such a long time, but of course they don't listen. Where the reason why our Mother Earth did not go up into flames in the past was because they had controlled burns. They knew when and how to burn so that we wouldn't have the problem we're having right now, right? That's the same thing with you and I. We need controlled burns. You will alchemize. You are coming home to God. You're accepting the atonement, whether you do it in this lifetime or not. It's up to you. It's up to us. That's a choice because we have free will in the physical, but we're under God's will. We're still coming home. How do we do control burns in our lives? It's called meditation.
Yeah.
That's why our brother Jesus Christ said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Stop going to the freaking church. And I'm not saying not to go to the church because I do feel that churches are important right now, especially because community is so important. So important. And I love what I'm seeing in LA, which maybe the mainstream media is not showing as much, but people coming together, supporting each other. LA is a melting pot. There is no race in LA. And as you can see, whether you were poor, middle class, or rich, you were affected with everything that occurred. And guess what? There will be more evolution in your life. There will be more evolution in Mother Earth. Are you going to do a controlled burn? Because that's Kundalini. Kundalini energy it alchemizes, it burns away what no longer serves you. But it goes back to our problem. We get the illness. We don't trust God. We think we're being punished. Now the world over there is like, look at God punishing LA for being sinners. That God didn't do that. We did that to ourselves because we could have controlled the burn. We could have analyzed and looked at, or I think we were doing that, but then the 1% powers that be don't allow it to be healed, right? But it's the exact same thing. So we're all, and this is a full moon in Cancer. We're recording this, you and I together. And this is why this needed to happen today, because we are all gaining awareness of the burn that's happening inside of us, whether it's a physical disease, a mental disease, a resentment, a relationship, money. There's burning happening inside of us. Can you control the burn? Can you tame it? Because what happens typically is that when these kind of things happen, people go away farther from God.
Yes.
Are you going to get closer to God? Because that's what Matthew's 4:14 was about. Going beyond darkness into the light. And you do that through sitting with yourself, not sitting with anyone else. Because God is inside of you, not in the church, not in the guru. Again, even myself, as a teacher, as a mentor, I'm just a channel for God. And so are you. And we can't even teach people to be soul connected. All we could do is inspire them. And what is inspiration? In spirit. So how do you do that? It's not even by the words I'm telling you. How do I live my life? Because in
Yeah.
the age of Aquarius, there's no secrets. Everything is revealed. Energy speaks louder than words. So I think it's so relevant and so synchronistic that we're talking about this physical disease and the connection to generational trauma, and we're seeing it in the world as above, so below. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes, I went through a phase, I think it was last year, where or the year before, started the year before, where I was very angry at God, and he brought me back little by little. He brought me back, and he told me, "Don't ever doubt me ever again." And even then, I was still very in conviction. Yeah, okay, like speaking to him again.
Yeah.
But even then, my daughter just 100% committed to God. She's reading the Bible. She's just like, "Mommy, everything's perfect. It's all part of God's plan." I'm like, I've been going to mass with her. She's just really, God is going. He's bringing me back even more through her. And I love it. I love it. I think it's perfect.
So beautiful. See there, that is exactly, and you were present enough to notice that.
Yes.
That's where your healing came in. Because I can assure you that if she was doing this even 10 years ago, you wouldn't have even noticed that and it wouldn't have mattered. And maybe
Yeah.
she wouldn't even be getting closer to God.
Yeah.
Totally can relate to that. I see my sons and my husband, and they've been getting into prayer. They come together in the mornings and they pray on their business. And ever since they started doing that, and my youngest one too, he's very much into Jesus Christ right now. He's like, should I read the course? And then the elder one is, no, don't read the course. That's not real. Read the Bible. But all like so they have their own opinions and stuff like that, and all these different things. But I love it because they're my children. I want them to have their own voice,
Yeah.
their own opinion. But my son just likes to go to the oldest esoteric teachings and get right. You know? But I love it. I absolutely love it. And what I notice is that even though there were challenges this year, lots of them, lots of change, lots of things happening, it's like they're getting closer to God.
Yes.
They're getting
Yeah.
closer to God. And I'm getting closer to God. And that is surrender is for the strong, not for the weak.
Yes. And she tells me all that she carries her Bible with her all the time. She'll do fasting for 3 days. She even went out to eat with us at the restaurant while she's fasting. Why did you even come? She's no, I need to be strong enough to, if I'm fasting, even if you guys are all eating in front of me, no, I'm fasting for God right now and it's okay. And she's talking to people for her age and older people, everybody about God. And then even at work, her supervisor or manager, they were like, I was with her yesterday. They were having a meeting every morning before they go out. And she's like, I don't know what happened, but if you guys don't believe in God, something happened because the whole time I was there with her, things just kept happening and happening that honestly, I can't deny it. Whatever you believe in, if it's God, the universe, whatever, it's real because I witnessed it when I was with her. Like stuff just kept happening. And she keeps bringing me back and I'm so grateful for her.
God, Elvira. That right there is a representation of what happens when you heal yourself. That is worth it. To be able to one day we're gonna transition. And that used to scare me a lot when I would think that when I had a more dysregulated nervous system. But now at this point, because I have been able to be much more present with them, I really feel that I've equipped my children to be able to handle that transition. And I feel like that is such an honor and something that most parents don't do.
Yeah.
And that's why we freak out thinking, oh, what one day something will happen to our kids. To be able to have peace and know that your child is connected to the divine and to God, there, there's no price for that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no price for that. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation today so that awareness can grow within you to see just how favored you actually are. And it's perfectly normal for us to have valid emotions when we're going through things like somebody in our family transitioning, or even like the whole journey of forgiveness. It wasn't and hasn't been easy. It's a long road, and things sometimes, even though I feel like I fully have forgiven, things still come up. But it's not as invasive as it was before. It's more like I think it's not even me anymore. It's the people involved. I feel like I'm liberated to a point where I can be totally at peace, but I want everyone around to also be in that state of consciousness, which then goes back to what you were saying earlier about other people don't do the work. And that's my problem too, that then I'm like, why don't you get it? Like, you could be better. You know what I mean? Which is why it's best for us to stay away from those situations.
No, my issue is accepting it. And that's where I need to learn how to let it go. They're not doing the work. I need to accept that's not part of their journey and it's okay.
Yes.
Not let it affect me as much as it does. That's where I struggle, where I don't let it affect me as much as it should.
But even that is valid, because we move through this ladder of consciousness, we climb higher and higher. And I do believe that the more we regulate the nervous system, the more that we go higher. And then the more it's like reading the same things I'm telling you right now. Again, like I said, you listen to tomorrow, your nervous system was regulated, it makes more sense. And you're able to kind of like really connect it, right? And that's why this work is endless. And to me, it's not work. It's just, this is my spiritual practice, right? My spiritual practice every day is, and I look at people that are super successful, and they have I'm talking about real success, the relationships, the wealth, the money, the property, not what people think is success, which is you got the money, but then no one talks to you and everyone hates you. That's not success to me. And like I said, I've been, even my sons, because they're in this mastermind group and their coach he's like a multimillionaire. I'm pretty sure he's getting close to being billionaire, and he's one of the biggest developers in New York. And that's their mentor, that's their coach. And him, in his coaching, they did like a business planning thing. All he talks about is God. And he wasn't talking about a God a lot a year ago, even. And now it's like my success is correlated to my relationship with God. He's literally talking to these businessmen about how, do you pray on your business? Do you pray on your day-to-day activities? I'm like, yes, 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 yes. The masculine is also getting it.
Yeah. That's
And,
beautiful.
and there's so many other great examples. Michael Singer, for some of you, he wrote the Surrender Experiment. He wrote Untethered Soul. Read the Surrender Experiment, because he became a multi-billionaire through surrender to God. So there are so many now representations of how this is happening more and more. And when I think about the journey of somatic healing, which involves body, mind, and spirit through Kundalini yoga therapy and the Course in Miracles spiritual psychotherapy, then that's really what it's all about. It's about healing your relationship with yourself, which is healing the relationship that you have with God. And that in itself is what heals the physical body. My God, so much. So, what last words did you want to share before we close out for today?
This was definitely a coaching call for me. It was like a one-on-one live for everybody to see. But yeah, just keep working on it. It's a work in progress. There's no timeline, obviously. It's just whenever the right time is, when the right time is there, it's gonna happen. And we just need to surrender. And I do tell him, I'm like, you have a plan. I accept it. I have my days where it gets difficult to accept it, but I know he has a plan. We just have to keep trusting the plan.
And that in itself is a miracle. It really is. Because I think I've spent most of my life throwing tantrums and just saying, why? Which just creates a lot more time and resistance. So, thank you. Beautiful words for sure. I think, yeah, the last thing, you wrapped it up so beautifully that I just want to remind everyone that generational trauma, yes, it may have shaped your past. I absolutely get it. Your emotions are 1000% valid. In fact, the first step is, let's validate your emotions. Okay. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you because you're going through an illness, or someone's going through an illness and you're afraid, or you're angry. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. That's not the message. What I want everyone to understand is that it doesn't have to define your future, and it doesn't have to define your now. I know that today we've explored some deep things, how pain stored in our body is a signal, it's not a sentence. It's an opportunity for justice, not through punishment, but through love, through forgiveness, and through healing. The journey begins with the body, through the very transformative power of Kundalini therapy, and it deepens into the mind with the spiritual teachings of our brother Jesus Christ, as taught from what I learned in A Course in Miracles. This is how you reclaim your sovereignty and you heal your lineage. So, my goodness, a lot to talk about. And I know that we'll probably do a follow up on this episode in itself because, like I said, there's so many things that we've been through, that I've been through, even as it relates to illness, and that we can bring some more tangible results. So we'll take a spin to this because I know that there's going to be a lot of questions through this. Now, right now, the Sovereign Sisterhood Academy is closed for enrollment, but you can absolutely start your journey with us today of generational healing. There's a couple of ways. So, number one, you can join our complimentary Facebook group. This week, I go live there every Wednesday, and I'm going to be hosting a live healing session on healing the physical body after generational trauma. We're going to be doing some somatic releases there. So join us on the free Facebook community, facebook.com/sovereign woman, sovereign sisterhood movement. I'll link it in the description below. Or you can become a member of Satori Vitality and Spirituality. Satori is where we prepare for the deeper healing of generational healing by strengthening the nervous system. The focus here is increasing your vitality because typically with a lot of trauma comes a lot of emotions that are draining you from being able to even begin the journey. So we ground our body in this membership community. It's a foundational long-term transformation that we work towards. I'll link it below in the comments as well, so you can find out more information about it. Just remember, healing is your birthright and justice is your destiny. So join us on this generational healing journey and let us walk this path of sovereignty together. Thank you for you. We'll see you all next week.